Hi, my name is Jeanette Maxey. I'm a painter. I live in East Hartford, Connecticut, and I do paintings of people, places, and things that talk about culture. I'm a representational painter. I am an observational painter, so I paint from visual. I either set up a still life or a person in front of me, or I use a photograph as reference and integrate that into the picture that I'm working on. After I graduated college, I didn't really know what to work on, and so I started doing paintings of pears, and I got pretty obsessive about it, you know, taking a pear and making a still life, and I did about 50 of those paintings. I was working at a full-time job, and so that was an easy way for me to continue to hone my studio, hone my craft, and get used to working in the studio without deadlines or classes to work from. And after that, I started to do paintings about what you know, your family, and I started to address ideas of my environment, these found still lives of objects from 3 generations of family. And I would do paintings of those, in the attic, in the basement, these projects that were started that weren't ever finished. The blend of these older items from like my grandmother or grandfather to, my half-eaten cereal. So I was just playing with working on a regular basis and kind of figuring out who I am as a painter, as a person, and what I wanted to say throughout the work that I do, the work of painting that I do. After that, I started to do work in oils, and I did a lot of figure painting. So I've never really stopped painting from the time I graduated. I think it was 1998 till now. I think I stopped for about 2 years, and I was really miserable. I was really miserable. So it's something that I really need to do. It's something I have to figure out. And the reason why I started to do painting and drawing and art was because as a child, I started to become frustrated with language. I had something to say that I couldn't verbally articulate. So I started to do drawing and painting and kind of like arts. And that was another language for me to work in, and it was a relief because I had this other way to express myself. So that was like a big part of why I became an artist. And I haven't, like I said, I haven't stopped since. There's no top. I think one of the things that I'd like folks to know when they're looking through this exhibition, one of the reasons why I started creating this body of work is because I moved to Singapore and I experienced complete and utter culture shock. Singapore is a very diverse community, Chinese, Malay, Tamil, Europeans, Americans, Filipino. So it's this, they call it the Rojak. And I was so overwhelmed, I didn't know where I fit in. And I really felt like I was on the outside. And the funny thing is, before I moved to Singapore, I was so upset because I felt like I had no culture. My grandfather immigrated to US, and it was all about, speaking only English. You're American now. These are the things that you do. You kind of remove yourself from that culture because America is now your country. And so growing up with him in the household, that was kind of the mentality, not speaking Italian, not having a culture. So, all of my complaining, and then moving to Singapore, looking at my culture from a distance, I realized, yes, I do have a culture. And so, in order to kind of get over the culture shock of living in another country, I started walking around in the town, in the city, going to grocery stores, and it's all overwhelming, and there's no censor, so you're taking it all in. And I started to do paintings, small paintings, just to kind of figure out how to process all of these images that I see, why women hold umbrellas, why, you know, the grocery stores have all these different kinds of foods and what they are. You know, sweetened condensed milk, hawker centers, things like that. So after a year, I started kind of getting the rhythm of doing these works in gouache. And the reason why I chose gouache was because it's a very easy medium to kind of start and stop at any given time. And it's on paper, and it's very easy to fit, to travel and whatnot. So the second year I started doing these paintings. They're the smaller 5-inch by 7-inch pieces. I was really talking about the idea of being inside a culture and outside of a culture, peering through, trying to figure out what this object is. Whether it's a plastic bag with a red sauce in it, you have no idea what it is. It's a mystery. It's something to explore. And I was very excited about the object itself, you know, as a little sculptural piece, but also like what's in it. It's sambal. What is sambal? You know, it's a hot sauce you put on everything. Everybody uses it, you know. Each region of Southeast Asia has a different kind of sambal. So there's a story there that I wanted to explore. And for me, it was such a great way to learn about the new place that I was living in. So during my time in Singapore, I painted about 300 paintings. So I'd go pretty ferociously every day. You know, it's like once you start to go down this path, it's like the rabbit hole. You start like thinking about everything, you know, every object you're looking at, you know, going into a grocery store and being, you know, surprised about all different kinds of objects. You know, where is this thing come from? And one of the other things about Singapore that really struck me was the rapid pace of progression. So this year, Singapore will be 50 years old, officially. And in this time, the history that has happened is amazing, and the progress has been, in one person's lifetime, it's gone from a little kampong with, you know, chickens and, you know, very, very rural, more rural, I would say, not very rural, more neighborhood, smaller places to, you know, first world skyscrapers and, you know, different kinds of industry that aren't related to resources. So it's kind of the progress, I always say, is like for 1 year 1 year outside of Singapore is like 7 years in Singapore. It's like dog years, you know. So it's the pace of the development is so rapid, and you can see that in the environment through the buildings and the skyscrapers. One of the things that I found really beautiful was when they start creating a building, you'll see a skeleton go up, a metal structure, and then they wrap the building in blue, and the building kind of gets evolves from the inside out until they reveal the building by taking down the blue cloth. So a lot of the things that I really enjoyed was looking at these, you know, buildings and these, you know, sculptures, and kind of like understanding how it develops. And if I were to go there today or in 5 years from now, Singapore would look quite different from the time that I was there. So that was something that was really exciting for me. When I came back to the US, it was difficult for me to start working, but then I just kind of applied the same technique of working as I did in Singapore. I started looking at things like bees. I started looking at things like the cheese balls. You know, what are these things? It's a food. It's a food designed to make you want to eat more. You know, it's bright orange. It's kind of ridiculous and fun. And of course, there are these giant containers. You know, big sizes of everything. So that to me was kind of a fun way to kind of reintroduce back into my own culture. So one of the other pieces in the show is, it's not so much about choice, but about the actual, about the sun. So in Singapore, we're 1 degree north of the equator. So when there's a sunrise or sunset, it's a light switch that goes on and off. in Connecticut, we're, 41 degrees north of the equator, we have these really long sunsets. And with those long sunsets, you get really long shadows. And I found these to be quite beautiful. And I never really saw that. You know, each place has kind of like a color palette. And the color palette from Connecticut to, you know, even in Florida or in Indiana or the Southwest, those color palettes are quite different. So landscape was really something that I paid attention to. Tobacco barns was something that was, you know, have always been here, but I never really thought of. And I know other artists have thought about those and painted them. But for me, it was not just about growing the tobacco, where it's grown. It's about what the tobacco is used for these cigars that kind of, you know, go to other places or come from, you know, they're used as wrappers for other tobacco, and how that gets kind of shifted around and what tobacco means. So it's like I said, the rabbit hole of ideas and like where this one thing of, you know, tobacco can take you. It's a lot, you know. In Indonesia, tobacco is everywhere, and it's so cheap. It has a totally different kind of idea. You know, people have become extremely wealthy on tobacco. In Connecticut, not so much, you know. It's on the way down for being a resource to sell. So. So another story about coming back to the US was this whole big excitement about kale. You know, in Singapore, we don't really have kale in Singapore. If we do, it's really expensive. So, you know, I like vegetables, and one of the first things I did when I came back to the US was I bought kale. What is the fuss, you know? So in the exhibition, there's a painting about that. And just, you know, the thing that was kind of funny too is here we have this, you know, superfood of kale being very nutritious, and the antithesis of would be the cheese balls, you know, and how there's no nutritious value of it at all, yet they're both pretty appealing as foods. You know, they hit that primal spot inside of you. One that's, you know, just complete gluttony, and the other one is, yes, this is a good thing for me, you know. The thing I'd like folks to think about when they're looking at this exhibition is the idea of culture and place, and how, you know, you don't have to go to a faraway place like Singapore to experience culture and exoticism. It's here in Connecticut, it's in East Hartford, it's in our grocery stores, it's, you know, within our neighborhoods. The story from my grandfather is actually how he immigrated to the US. They were on a boat and they were headed towards New York, like many people, to Ellis Island. And he got there on a Friday. Him and his family got there on a Friday. And it was a holiday weekend. So Ellis Island was closed, and he actually had to stay there the entire weekend plus the Monday on the boat before, you know, entering into the country. So that was kind of a funny thing. And, you know, the house I grew up in, he built, and it's really kind of a mishmash layout with scraps of wood and things kind of, if you peel away the walls, you'll see all of this makeshift kind of thing, make do. You know, you're a resourceful person when you need to be. So the things that I learned from him are to be resourceful with my, you know, making things. You know, I'm a maker. I'm primitive, you know, I make paintings. And when I did a study abroad in Italy, and when I it was in Cortona. when I did the study abroad in Italy, all the lights went on. It was amazing to see like what culture he came from and how I had a deeper understanding of who he was, and through that, who I was. So, to understand culture, I think people start with themselves and what they know, and use empathy as a tool to kind of get a deeper understanding of the other culture or the other person. And that's like the starting point. And that's kind of how I work with the objects that I paint, or the people that I paint, the places that I think that I paint. I ask these questions, and they're a delight. It's so exciting. Never ending, no top.